Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive, a place where forgotten stories breathe again, where whispers crawl from the cracks of reality, and fear finds a voice. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because some tales were never meant to be told. Tonight's story is titled, The Key Beneath the Ashes. Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. The Fifth Tone. Caleb hadn't planned to drive east. He hadn't planned anything in a long time. The car hummed beneath him, tires kissing a stretch of blacktop that felt more suggestion than road. The desert on either side shimmered in the heat like it was breathing, alive but barely. State Route 50, the loneliest road in America. And still it felt more crowded than his thoughts. The map on the passenger seat was decades old. A red circle marked a town that didn't exist on any GPS. No coordinates. No roads led to it. The name, Hurst One, was scrawled in a shaky hand. Not his. He didn't know who had given him the map, or when. All he knew was the sound. The fifth tone. It had started weeks ago. A low hum, barely audible, like an old television left on in the next room. He would hear it at night, then in the shower, then while talking to strangers who suddenly stopped mid-sentence and stared as if they too had heard it. Then the dreams began. Always teeth, falling, spiraling, cracking, impossibly large in patterns that made his eyes water. Sometimes they bled, sometimes they whispered. Then he'd wake up choking on dust. But the worst was the call. The voicemail from his sister. Her voice panicked, breaking up in static. Then came the hum. Louder. Not a malfunction. A message. And then, nothing. The tone took its place. He passed the last gas station hours ago. Rust peeled from its roof like sunburned skin. A wind chime made of animal bones clinked in a breeze that didn't exist. Inside there was no one at the register. Just a buzzing radio whispering backward words and a jar of teeth beside the cash register labeled "Pick One." He left cash and didn't take a tooth. Outside the air thickened. The sky grew heavy. He kept driving. And then he saw it. The roadhouse. It hadn't been there before. It stood hunched on the roadside like it had been abandoned for years and only remembered how to be real a moment ago. Its sign flickered in the dark, still open, except the S stuttered in and out like it was deciding whether to stay. He parked. The air smelled like ozone and dust. Inside, the lights buzzed low, dim yellow casting long shadows. The furniture was dusty but untouched. Music crackled from an old jukebox. No tune, just a vibrating hum that made the walls seem to pulse. At the bar sat a woman. She didn't look up as he entered. Just poured a drink and slid it across the counter. Whiskey. Deep amber. It smelled like cedar and something older. Her eyes were milk gray, like someone had filled them with smoke. Long way from anywhere, she said. Caleb didn't respond. He didn't need to. The tone was louder here, vibrating behind his teeth, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. You hear it now, don't you? She said. Most can't until they're too far to turn back. He sat, took the drink. It burned like fire. But beneath the burn there was something familiar, a memory he couldn't name. You came farther than most, the woman said. He looked at her more closely. Her features didn't hold still. One moment she was young, maybe 30. The next, lines webbed her face. Her eyes didn't change. Only her skin remembered time. She placed something on the bar between them. A tooth, long pale, not quite human, etched with a perfect spiral on its crown. He reached for it instinctively. The root was rough. His fingers brushed something carved into it. His name, carved like a grave marker. You've carried it before, the woman said softly. Maybe you'll carry it longer this time. "What is this place?" Caleb asked, voice hoarse. "What's happening to me?" She smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. "This is where the road forgets itself, where the loop begins, or ends, depending on how deep you go." She gestured toward the door. "The first gate is near the canyon. When the ash begins to fall, you'll know you're close." The jukebox stuttered. The tone surged. The lights blinked. He turned to look at the jukebox just for a second, and when he turned back, the woman was gone. Only the glass, the tooth, and the tone remained. Outside, night had arrived without stars. The sky was a sheet of bruised velvet. The desert no longer shimmered, it watched. Silent, expectant. Caleb clutched the tooth. It was warm now. The spiral on its crown seemed to rotate just barely when he wasn't looking. The tone buzzed gently, like a lullaby from somewhere below the surface of the world. He got in the car and turned toward the canyon, toward the ash, toward the first gate. Part 2, the Ash Monastery. The sky cracked open with the weight of dawn. Caleb's headlights flickered as the asphalt thinned, then vanished altogether, swallowed by sand and silence. The air had grown thicker, heavier. It clung to him like smoke. He didn't remember falling asleep, but somehow he woke up behind the wheel. The road was gone. Before him, the land collapsed into a gaping wound, a canyon of scorched rock and ash, its rim frayed like torn flesh. Nestled deep in the basin, half buried in breathing smoke, stood the ruins of a monastery. Its silhouette rippled like a heat mirage, as though reality struggled to contain it. He parked at the edge and stepped out. His boots sank into dust that felt like ground bone. The fifth tone, dull and constant, hummed in his chest like a second heart. The tooth in his pocket vibrated slightly, like it knew this place. Caleb descended. The monastery loomed larger as he approached. There was no gate, just a gaping arch of stone, scorched black. The stones seemed carved from fossilized flame. Around the entry, he saw teeth embedded in the stone, some tiny like a child's, others jagged and animalistic. Each one stared without eyes. Inside it was cold, not temperature, but memory, as if the monastery had frozen in time and grief. The walls were carved in spirals, not painted, etched deep into the stone with what looked like claws. Beneath his feet, the tiles bore more teeth. Some cracked as he stepped. He passed through a nave. Pews shattered. Candles melted into bone-white fingers. And still, the fifth tone thrummed like a heartbeat for something that no longer lived. At the end stood an altar, and behind it, a woman, barefoot, still. Her long black hair hung over her face like curtains of ash. Her dress was torn, old-fashioned, but Caleb recognized her. The bartender, younger, or older, or just different. She stood tracing a spiral into the layer of ash on the altar, over and over, a mindless ritual, like she had done it 1,000 times before. Caleb approached slowly. He didn't speak. She did. "You remember this place?" "No," he said, though something inside him recoiled at the lie. "You built it once," she said. Her voice was soft, but inside it he heard echoes. Not just one voice, but dozens layered beneath, each one whispering the same sentence from different mouths. "I built? The first loop was yours. The others just followed." She lifted her head. Her eyes were gray. Not empty, just full of endings. "You were meant to break it, but you got scared." The fifth tone shuddered louder, as if disagreeing. Behind the altar was a basin. A large stone bowl filled with ash so dark it shimmered. Floating above it, suspended by nothing, was a second tooth. This one was different, larger, curved inward like a hook, and on its surface not a spiral, but a crack. like it had once shattered and been pieced back together. Caleb stared. His hand trembled. "Take it," the woman said. "You'll need it." He stepped forward, hesitating. The tooth pulsed with heat. When he reached in, the ash rose up around his wrist like water boiling backward. And then, memory broke open. He saw a crib in a firelit room, a lullaby playing from a warped cassette, a mirror that reflected someone else, a hospital corridor smeared in blood and symbols. Himself, and then not himself. He screamed, but no sound came. The woman's voice returned, now behind his eyes. "Each time you forget, but something always leaks through." He pulled the tooth free. His palm was burned. It bled where the spiral had seared his skin. The woman stepped down from the altar now, walked past him. She was transparent at the edges, flickering like bad reception. "You weren't supposed to come back," she said. "Why?" "Because you remember. And they hate that." "Who's they?" She didn't answer. The air inside the monastery shifted. The walls groaned. Dust rained down from the rafters. The spiral carvings began to spin, not physically but in his mind. The fifth tone became a scream. Caleb ran. Behind him, the altar cracked down the middle. The basin exploded in ash. The building folded into itself, not like a collapse but like a decision being unmade. By the time he crossed the arch again, the monastery was gone. Just gone. No ruin, no crater, no proof. Only the tooth in his hand, and the heat still etched into his palm. He staggered back to the car, but the sky had changed. The sun no longer rose from the east. It hung dead center in the sky, motionless, pale, and wide like an eye too tired to blink. And still the tone played, fainter now, but it was in him. Part 3: The Drowned Gate. The road vanished again. This time there was no fanfare, no flickering sign, no voice, just silence. The world fell away in the rearview mirror. Caleb stepped from the car, the second tooth warm in his hand, its spiral still faintly glowing beneath dried blood. Ahead, the desert gave way to a forest, not the kind from maps or memory. This one had no leaves, no wind. Its trees were fossilized, brittle and gray, as though frozen mid-scream. They stood in impossible silence, their limbs gnarled like twisted roots reaching skyward. Beneath his boots, the soil felt wrong. It didn't give, didn't shift. It was like stepping on a dry tongue. He entered without thinking. The fifth tone had grown distant, replaced now by something subtler. A pressure behind the eyes, a pull between ribs, like gravity turned sideways. Inside the forest, the world became narrow. The trees closed in, shadows swallowing distance. Caleb tried to mark where he'd come from, but every step rearranged the path. Behind him, the trail changed shape, spiraled, folded. He was inside a loop, and it knew he knew. 3 paths opened before him, each leading into darkness. And in the center, impaled upon a stone spike, was a figure. Himself, or almost. The man twitched as if sensing him. His face was cracked open with veins of dried black tar, and his mouth was stuffed with ash. When his eyes opened, they glowed orange. He spoke without moving his lips. "Choose one. You always choose wrong." Caleb's heart pounded. The first path veered sharply left, narrow, thorned, with whispers curling along the ground like smoke. The second went straight, flat and eerily well lit as if recently swept clean. The third twisted sharply right, its entrance lined with mirrors, broken and buried halfway into the trees. He hesitated. The impaled version of himself began to laugh, dry, choking, rhythmic. "It doesn't matter. You end up here anyway." Caleb gritted his teeth and stepped onto the third path. The mirrors grew taller as he moved deeper. They lined the path like watchers, each reflecting not what was in front but what wasn't. Some showed him older, others younger. In one he was covered in bandages, in another his face had no mouth. But one mirror made him stop. It showed a room, white walls, a hospital bed, an infant wrapped in gray cloth. He stepped closer. The image didn't change. A woman sat in the corner, rocking slowly. Her face turned. It was the bartender, except this time she was crying. When she looked up, she mouthed a word: "Run." The mirror shattered before he could blink. He stumbled backward into the arms of something tall and cold. Spinning, Caleb came face to face with a being made entirely of wet leather, skin stretched over bones that didn't match. It had no eyes, no mouth, but rows of stitched teeth ringed its stomach like a zipper made of pain. The third guardian. It didn't speak. It listened. Caleb realized the trees had gone silent. The wind had stopped. Even his breath made no sound. The guardian reached forward. Its hand was his hand, identical down to the scar on his knuckle. It placed its palm on Caleb's chest. He felt heat, then sinking. Suddenly he wasn't in the forest. He stood knee-deep in black water, surrounded by pillars of stone. Above him, no sky, just a ceiling of bone, curved and wet like the inside of a skull. The guardian stood at the center, submerged to its waist. In its hands, not a tooth but a mirror, the same one from earlier. It held it out to Caleb, and for the first time the fifth tone returned. But this time it didn't sound like a note. It sounded like a voice, twisted and elongated into resonance. He took the mirror. Inside it he saw his face, but fractured into 9 shards. Each shard showed a moment. Him standing in the hospital corridor covered in blood. Him placing something in the ground and walking away. Him screaming in a padded room. Him watching the world loop again and again. Him burning something sacred. Him refusing to turn back. Him kneeling before the architect. Him running from the woman. Him burying a tooth under the floorboards. Then the mirror cracked and turned to ash. The guardian collapsed. Its stitched teeth burst open, pouring blood that wasn't red but gray. Caleb woke on the forest floor. The fossil trees had receded. The sky had turned deep purple. In his palm wasn't a tooth, but a seed. Small, black, cold, spiraled. A voice echoed faintly behind his ear. That wasn't supposed to happen. He looked down the path, now just one trail. It led toward a distant structure. A spire built of bone and glass, glowing faintly under a dead sun. The next gate, but he didn't move yet. The seed pulsed in his hand. Not warm, not cold, just alive. Part 4, The Cathedral of Teeth. The spire loomed for miles. Caleb walked without rest, his boots dragging across land that changed texture every few steps. Ash to sand, bone to stone, skin to frost. The world no longer made sense, but he didn't question it anymore. The seed in his hand pulsed faintly, not just with light, with sound. A rhythm that no longer matched the fifth tone. It was its own voice now. By dusk, or something pretending to be dusk, he reached the structure. It was massive. A cathedral fused from bone and stone, its windows made of stretched skin and stained with ash. Spires like teeth twisted skyward, vanishing into clouds of black vapor. There were no doors, just a gaping mouth of bone and darkness. He stepped inside. The air within was thick with incense and rot. He walked beneath vaulted ceilings lined with human jawbones, all grinning in perfect symmetry. The pews were ribs. The pulpit was a pelvis. Every surface was alive with teeth, polished, filed, arranged in spirals or constellations. Above the altar, a massive stained skin window depicted a spiral cracking open, with a black seed at its core. He stepped into the nave and the cathedral spoke, not aloud, inside him. "You've broken the order." The voice was male, smooth, measured, but cold like silk pulled from a corpse. "You took what wasn't offered. You interfered." Caleb gritted his teeth. "You mean the seed? It wasn't for you. That guardian was a reflection, not a gate. I didn't choose it. It chose me." Silence, then laughter, quiet but infinite, like something laughing behind every wall. "You are becoming inconsistent." A figure emerged from the shadows behind the altar, not walking, forming, like bone knitting itself together. It had no face, only an approximation, a surface that twisted like melted wax. It wore a robe made of mirrors, each shard reflecting a version of Caleb screaming or silent or dead. Caleb raised the seed. It pulsed stronger now. The figure paused. "You don't understand what that is." "Then tell me." "It's a lie," the voice said. "A failed exit. A mutation from a version of you that thought escape meant erasure." He stepped closer. "I don't believe you." "Of course you don't. That's why you loop." The altar split open, not cracked, peeled. Inside was a recess lined with velvet made of stitched tongues. Resting at the center, a third tooth, but this one was broken, snapped at the root, burned at the tip, and branded with a spiral that bled. Caleb didn't reach for it. The figure tilted its head. "This is where you always take it. Not this time. You have to. That's the pattern." "Exactly." He turned away. The cathedral screamed. The bones vibrated. The ribs cracked. The jaws above the ceiling snapped in unison. He ran, not in fear but in rebellion. The voice chased him. "If you leave without it, the next gate won't open." He didn't stop. The corridor twisted behind him. Stretched, warped. Teeth burst from the walls like tumors, snapping at his heels. He clutched the seed tighter. It was humming now, louder than the tone. A new sound, rising like a choir made of wind and metal and memory. At the end of the hallway, a door appeared. A real door. What? No spiral. No teeth. He slammed into it. The cathedral fell silent. Behind the door, only darkness. And in the center, floating, a pool of water. Perfectly still. Caleb approached, breath ragged. His reflection stared back. But it wasn't him. It was the bartender. She looked older now. Eyes dark, sunken. Her mouth moved without sound. Then, from behind him, her voice. "You were supposed to take the tooth." He turned. She stood just inches away, soaked in black water, hair clinging to her face. "But you didn't." "No." She studied him, then smiled, not with joy but with something like relief. "Good," she whispered. "Then maybe this time the architect won't see you coming." She stepped forward and placed her palm on his forehead. Cold. Final. Caleb collapsed. He woke alone, lying on soft ash. Above him, the sky was no longer purple. It was red, and full of spirals. The fifth tone had shifted. A new frequency emerged beneath it. Lower. Older. Not a tone. A word. Spoken in a voice he almost recognized. "Caleb." He stood. The door was gone. The cathedral had vanished. But in his pocket the seed remained, and beside him, etched into the ash like a wound, a circle with no spiral. Part 5. The Broken Spiral. The red sky pulsed like a wound. Caleb walked across fields of ash that shifted beneath his feet like slow breath. The seed in his pocket vibrated with a low, steady rhythm, beating against his thigh like a second pulse. He hadn't seen the spiral for hours, and that was the problem. Everywhere he'd been so far, stone, skin, tooth, mirror. The spiral had always been present. Etched, burned, branded, whispered. But not here. Here the symbols were wrong. They looped backward, interrupted mid-curve. Some spirals bent inward and then reversed. Others frayed at the edges like forgotten thoughts. The spiral was breaking. He walked until the ground grew soft. A new sound emerged, wet, slow, rhythmic. A sound like breathing. Ahead, the ash fell away into a basin. And in the center of that basin, a tree. Dead but not dry. Its bark was slick and black, its limbs twisted like ligaments. Teeth hung from its branches on cords of nerve. Beneath it, nailed to the roots with bones, was a man, or what remained of one. Caleb approached. The man was slumped forward, his arms stretched wide in crucifixion. His head twitched slightly at Caleb's steps, and then slowly, painfully, he looked up. Caleb stared into his own face. Not a version, not a reflection. It was him, his exact face, but older, weaker, sick with looping. His doppelganger coughed dry ash and whispered, "You got further this time." Caleb froze. "How do you know me?" "I am you," the nailed man said, "or what you became last time." The seed pulsed harder now, as if recognizing him. "You tried to plant it," the man rasped, "but you hesitated. You buried it in the wrong place. The architect saw. The ground refused it." The loop began again. Caleb's throat tightened. "What is this place?" The man smiled through broken teeth. "A graveyard for mistakes." The tree groaned behind them. More teeth fell from its branches, embedding in the ground like seeds. Each tooth bore a spiral, but twisted, incomplete, some cracked open like eggshells. Caleb stepped closer. "I can get you down." "You could," the man said. "But if you do, the gate closes. I was left here for a reason." "You're me." "No," he said softly. "I'm a version of you who still obeys the rules." You're not." The ground beneath them rumbled. A crack spread outward from the base of the tree. The man convulsed, coughing something wet. Blood, thick with ash, poured from his mouth. "You have the seed?" he gasped. Caleb nodded. The man's eyes widened, not with fear, with hope. "Then go. Go before it breaks again. But you'll die here." "I already did." Caleb looked around. Behind the tree the gate stood. Unlike the others, it wasn't a structure. It was a tear in the sky, a jagged hole pulsing with darkness, ringed by broken spiral teeth. It breathed in slow gusts of heat. Beyond it he couldn't see anything. No light, no sound, just absence. He turned back. The man had gone limp again, but whispered, "Plant it where no one watches." Caleb turned to leave, but stopped. At the edge of the basin, a symbol had been etched into the ash, the spiral, but not the usual one. This one was splintered, fractured in its center like it had tried to fold in on itself and failed. Beneath it, 4 words were carved. "This time is different." He looked back at the man, then at the seed. He placed the seed on the spiral. The earth didn't tremble. The sky didn't cry out. The seed simply sank into the ash and disappeared. He waited. Nothing. Then the tree groaned, louder. Its trunk cracked open, revealing a hollow center filled with black mist. The nailed version of himself began to shake violently, convulsing as if something was exiting through his mouth. And then, the gate ahead opened. The spiral around it corrected itself. Not whole, but healing. Caleb turned to his dying self, but the man smiled. "Different," he whispered again. "Finally," then turned to ash. Caleb stepped through the gate. No sound, no pain, only pressure, like stepping through skin. He emerged somewhere wrong. Not hell. Not the dream world. A hallway. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. White linoleum. Clean. Bleached. The hum of machines beyond closed doors. A hospital. He looked down. His hands were clean. No ash. No burns. The seed was gone. But in his palm, a small mark remained. A circle. Unbroken. Empty. No spiral. Just potential. Part 6. The Memory Ward. The hallway buzzed like a dying insect. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Caleb stepped onto the linoleum. His boots echoed softly, too loud in the sterile silence. No wind. No fifth tone. Only the hum of machines behind closed doors. He walked. Door after door past him, each labeled not with numbers but moments. The first lie. The night she died. The moment you could have turned back. The seed that never grew. He stopped. His fingers trembled as he reached for the last one. The bedroom. The door opened on its own. Inside, a small room lit by a single lamp. A child's bed. A mobile of stars hanging above. Books stacked neatly. Stuffed animals lined up in order. One missing. On the bed, curled beneath a gray blanket, lay a small figure. Caleb stepped inside. His knees nearly gave out. She lay still. Too still. Pale. Lips blue. Eyes closed like sleep had gone too deep. Abby. His sister. 8 years old. Gone so long, yet somehow this moment had never faded. He knelt beside the bed, hand trembling as he reached to brush hair from her face. But before he could touch her, a voice spoke behind him. You couldn't save her then. He turned. The woman stood in the doorway. Not the bartender. Not the version from the monastery. This time she wore a hospital gown. Her face was younger, but her eyes were ancient. You think breaking the loop will undo this? Caleb said nothing. You planted the seed too early. You let go of the tooth too soon. You think that's rebellion, but really it's fear. I don't want this again, Caleb said. I don't want to see her like this. Then don't. She stepped forward and snapped her fingers. The room vanished. He stood now in a long corridor of mirrors, each one showing a different version of the bedroom. In one, Abby was screaming. In another, she stood beside her bed, holding the seed. In another, Caleb wasn't there at all. The woman walked beside him. These are all the yous who failed, who fled, who planted it in the wrong place, who tried to bury her memory instead of face it. Caleb stopped. She was the first loop, he whispered. Yes. The fifth tone, she heard it first. The night she died. The woman nodded. And you followed it ever since, mistaking punishment for purpose. He looked down at his palm. The spiral was gone. In its place, a root had formed. Thin, black, alive. They arrived at the last mirror. It showed now. Caleb standing beside the woman in the corridor of mirrors. But something was different. In the reflection, his eyes were hollow. The root in his hand was a tooth again. He looked older, and behind him stood the architect, watching, smiling. You haven't broken anything yet, the woman said. Then what do I do? Don't forget her. That's where it always starts. The moment you forget Abby, the loop seals. He stepped toward the mirror. In the reflection, his other self turned slowly, meeting his gaze. For the first time, Caleb felt watched. He's you, the woman whispered, but not for long. The mirror shattered. The hallway cracked open like paper in fire. Everything folded inward. And then, silence. Caleb stood alone in a circular room of bone. Torches flickered on walls lined with hundreds of teeth, each one labeled with names. Dozens of times. All scratched out, except one pulsing faintly. The woman stood beside him again, But this time she held something in her hand. A tooth, the fourth, etched not with a spiral but with a star. She placed it in his hand. The architect is watching. But this is your last disguise. What happens if I fail again? Then someone else will walk your bones. He closed his fingers around the tooth. It was colder than the others, but familiar, like a childhood memory you forgot to carry into adulthood. The room shook. The fifth tone returned, but now it harmonized with a second tone, a counterpoint. The seed, still alive, still growing. The walls peeled open. A staircase formed from ribs, spiraling downward into darkness. The woman looked at him once more. Next is the hollow mouth. You've never made it that far. I will now. I hope so. For her sake. Then she vanished. Caleb descended, each step heavier than the last. And above him, the memory of Abby's voice sang a lullaby he hadn't heard in decades. But it no longer hurt. Now it guided. Part 7. The Hollow Mouth. The staircase coiled like a spine. Caleb descended in silence. No tones, no whispers. Even his breath made no sound. The further he went, the more reality unraveled. Walls turned to pulsating muscle, then vapor, then nothing at all. Only steps remained, floating in a blackness that had weight. He didn't know how long he walked. Hours, years. The tooth in his hand grew colder. The seed in his chest pulsed slower. And then, the stairs ended. He stood in a space too vast to see and too narrow to move in. The hollow mouth, not a location, a void, where all sound was swallowed. No wind, no heartbeats, no voice. Even his thoughts seemed muted here, muffled beneath the pressure of nothingness. Ahead, a mirror, the largest one yet, framed in bone, cracked at the corners, but intact. It didn't reflect him. It reflected the loop. Thousands of versions of Caleb, walking, running, weeping, laughing, stabbing, burning, building, breaking. Each one lived seconds before resetting. One version slammed its fists into a wall before vanishing. Another cradled a child that turned to ash. A third sat in a pew, whispering prayers to something with too many eyes. All of them repeating, none of them free. Caleb stepped forward. The mirror didn't change, but the ground beneath him did. It pulsed, then opened. He fell, not through air but through memory. He landed in a space without form. Shifting shapes of color and light moved like jellyfish in the dark. He floated but felt anchored. In the distance, a single figure emerged. Himself, but stripped. No clothes, no hair, no skin. Just a glowing shape, nerves and memory stitched together by fear. The echo of his soul. It approached without moving, and when it stopped in front of him, it opened its chest. Inside, the first spiral. Whole, untouched, but made of teeth. Hundreds of them. Some his, some hers, some belonging to no one. The echo spoke without sound. Give it back. Caleb shook his head. You took it. No, Caleb mouthed. I buried it. You forgot it. I remember now. Then you know what must happen. The echo extended a hand. In its palm, the seed. Small. Still pulsing. But twisted now. Beginning to sprout. Not roots. Moss. Tiny ones. Each open, whispering silent words. Caleb reached for it, but the echo closed its fist. Not until you decide. Decide what? To die. Or loop. The space cracked. Splinters of time slashed through the void, images of every ending Caleb had faced. The architect swallowing him whole. The woman turning away. Abby's hand slipping from his. The seed dissolving into ash. The fifth tone becoming a scream. And then, stillness. The echo waited. Its mouth finally opened, and in one final whisper that only Caleb could feel, "Choose." He looked down at his own body, at the tooth, the mark, the seed's echo. Then, without hesitation, he opened his chest. There was no pain, only release. He placed the cold tooth inside the hollow where his heart used to be, and closed the wound with both hands. The spiral burned across his skin, then cracked, then shattered. The void collapsed. The loop broke. He stood again, back in the roadhouse. The lights flickered. The bartender poured a drink. Same glass, same smell. But this time her eyes were not gray. They were blue and full of life. "You came back different," she said. He nodded. The tooth was gone. The seed had vanished, but the mark on his chest remained. No spiral, just a circle. Empty. Ready. She slid the drink toward him, but he didn't take it. He looked out the window. The desert was blooming. In the distance, a tree, green, alive, its roots pulsing with something new, something real. Part 8. The unspiraled gate. The desert stretched like a healed scar. No spirals, no tones, just wind, real wind. Caleb stood at the edge of the road just past the roadhouse. The neon sign no longer flickered. The windows no longer breathed. Behind him, the bartender didn't call out. She just watched, and maybe remembered. In his hand was nothing. No seed, no tooth, no mark. But the memory of the spiral burned in his blood. He could still hear the echo of his other selves, all of them screaming, whispering, looping. But now their voices were distant, fading like dreams beneath morning light. Ahead lay a trail of green. What? The tree he had seen from the window towered over the horizon. Its roots stretched like veins across the ground. Its trunk bore no symbols, no names, just bark and breath. He walked. As he neared, Caleb saw what grew beneath the tree. Thousands of them, half buried in the soil. Some decayed, some glimmering like bone-white seeds. Each one vibrated faintly like they wanted to speak. He bent down, picked one up. It was warm, familiar. It had his name carved into the base, but not scratched out, underlined, alive. He dropped it, and the ground answered. A low hum, not the fifth tone, not memory, something new. At the base of the tree was a hollow, not a door, a wound, a circular cavity as if the tree had once been pierced, by fire, by time, by sorrow. And inside that hollow, the architect, or what remained, a shape made of light and bone, folding in and out of itself, no longer whole. It pulsed weakly. Caleb stepped closer. The architect spoke without voice. "You are the first to arrive unlooked." Caleb didn't respond. "You were not meant to." "I know. Do you understand what this means?" "I think so." "Then choose." From the roots, two paths unfurled. One was barren, a spiral trail, perfect, unbroken, paved in ash and silence. It would take him back, to the start, to the roadhouse, to memory, to cycle. The other path was wild, unmarked, growing with roots and voices and stars. It twisted not in circles but outward. It was not an ending, it was a direction. The architect flickered. "If you plant the final seed, the gate will close. The next will not follow. You will be the last. And if I don't?" The loop continues. Better one maybe. A brighter spiral, but still closed. He looked down, at his own feet. They were not burned, not broken, but they left marks in the dirt. Not spirals, lines. He reached into the hollow. There, nestled in root and light, lay the last seed, smaller than the others, black as coal. warm as breath, no spiral, just a soft glow like a heartbeat that hadn't started yet. He held it up. It didn't vibrate. It waited. Behind him, the sky began to twist, not in anger, in anticipation. The loops were watching. The ghosts of every failed Caleb stood in the desert, silent. Some smiled, some wept, some turned away. He looked back only once. The bartender was gone. Only her glass remained on the bar, full, untouched. He turned again, faced the wound, faced the earth, and planted the seed, not in ash, not in memory, but in soil, real, living. The roots accepted it, and the tree sighed. The architect crumbled like salt in water. The ghosts scattered like mist, and the sky opened. No spirals, just stars, and one path, straight, unwritten. Caleb walked, each step lighter than the last, and somewhere behind him, a tooth cracked open like a seed, and from it, a new voice began to sing. Not a tone, a word, just one. Free.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.